Tonight, Blue Beetle gives a brand new meaning to open heart surgery. The birds of prey are extremely bad at not killing people. And Batwoman decides to make her own world's finest, with blackjack and hookers. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 50 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and on any other show, 50 would be a big deal, the big 5-0. But because this is a DC Comics show, I have to wait 2 more episodes before I can make a big deal out of anything. So this is just any other episode. Although, funny little story, on the day that this airs, it is my birthday. Hooray, to think, back when all these comics were coming out, I was but a wee lad. A legal adult, but a wee lad of a legal adult. And now I am older by a decade. So if you're going to leave any comments at all, which I would appreciate, make them nice. I need positive feedback on my birthday, because otherwise, what am I doing this all for? Anyway, let's go ahead and just talk about the comics, because I frankly went over on time for a couple of them, so this might be slightly longer of an episode than usual, but not by much, but it'll only get longer as I waste more time talking here. So, August 15th, 2012 had 14 comics, including the number 12 issues of Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern Corps, Captain Atom, DC Universe Presents, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, and Legion of Superheroes. Additionally, we have the number 11 issue of The Shade, and spoilers for every single one of those books. Yeah, it was a pretty alright week. Not super standout, but pretty alright overall. So, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and jump right into the Bat Block. Batwoman number 12, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Haden Blackman, art by J.H. Williams III as well. Last arc issue was a whole thing of just, I can't even begin, but urban legends, a few of them are now real, including Bloody Mary, and a bunch of kids were kidnapped and teleported to literal Medusa. Got it? Okay. This is the setup to Batwoman meets Wonder Woman, and they're kind of interspersed in their plots, but Batwoman's is by far the main plot, so I'm just going to go over that real quick. She's looking for Bloody Mary. She's completely out of leads, so she has teamed up with a werebeast named Kyle Abbott, and I guess they have history. Like, she acts like they do, but regardless, they're just trying to sniff out Bloody Mary. They make their way to a hall of mirrors. She says Bloody Mary 3 times. Bloody Mary appears. We get a little backstory on Bloody Mary. She was apparently cheated on by her husband. She had a miscarriage. She went crazy. She started killing women, and then she hung herself, or she was hanged. I'm not sure. Regardless, they get into a little bit of a fight, and it ends with Batwoman seemingly firing a normal-ass gun at Bloody Mary, which then shatters her. And she's like, oh, okay, well, you beat me, so everyone abandoned the lair, and they went to Medusa's lair. And it's like, Medusa, the group? And she's like, no, Medusa, the literal Gorgon, which is a real thing. And Batwoman's like, oh, crap, all right, thanks. And she shatters more Bloody Mary into more pieces, which she's like, that's probably not going to work, but, you know, felt good. So then she meets up with Bones and Chase on the boat that belonged to Falchion, because I guess they just claimed it as their own now. And she's like, yeah, here's the deal. If Medusa's real, none of us are prepared to deal with that. Literally none of us. The only person who I can think of who is ready to deal with like an ancient Greek legend like that is Wonder Woman. So I'm going to go get Wonder Woman. And Bones is like, okay, but you're going to be wearing like cameras and microphones and stuff, because I definitely need intel on Wonder Woman. So she has to make an excuse to leave Maggie for a while so that she can go track down Wonder Woman. Meanwhile, Maggie is currently in the center of a whole bunch of protests from kids who are like, hey, or not kids, from parents who are like, hey, where's our kids? You have done nothing. And also, 2 of the guys are standing in the crowd wearing KKK hoods that say GCPD on them. So I guess it's also kind of like a race thing as well, because they are all minority families. Anyway, Maggie is just burnt out, and she's like, she looks at the one parent. She's like, I've been calling you every day with updates, even when there aren't any. I'm doing my job. Why are you here with this? And it's like, hey, look, all we know is our kids aren't back, and that's only one person to blame for that. So Maggie, she's watching the news report later on of them saying like, oh, she's doing a horrible job, and blah, blah, blah. And Kate comes up and she's like, hey, you really shouldn't be watching that. And she's like, it doesn't matter. Hey, by the way, I'm pissed at you now. And she basically just lays into Kate for her having to leave despite Maggie having this horrible, awful time right now in her life. And she's like, hey, remember that time that we made love for the first time? I never asked you where you were before that, but now I am. Where were you? And Kate was like, I can't say. And so then Maggie just shows her the door and says like, well, don't come back until you do. So all in all, it was a pretty easy escape. Just pointing that out there. We get one page here of Bet and Colonel Kane, and I guess Colonel Kane's new girlfriend or wife. I'm genuinely unsure on that part. But regardless, Bet's just watching them have fun in the pool while they're enjoying. And then Colonel's like, hey, Bet, why don't you come down, relax, have some fun? And Bet's like, no, I'm keeping you your promise. You're going to show me all the stuff that Kate never did. And he's like, all right, cool. And as he's walking inside, he just throws a little smile. So, on to the Wonder Woman story that's been cut in between here. Not really even so much a story as much as she's just like narrating herself fighting against some of Falchion's monsters and former like cult members. It's members of Medusa. At least I think it's called Medusa. And she's just slashing through them, and she's like, I am neither mortal nor God. I am something in between. And I have discovered this secret serpent cult that has murdered children and eaten hearts, and I'm here to defeat them all. And she ends up beating down the entire cult single-handedly, or at least everybody there. And as she's covered in blood, she makes her way out into the sea to clean up, and she sees a submarine coming out of the water. And out of the submarine comes Batwoman. She's like, hey, got a minute? And thus leads into Batwoman / Wonder Woman. Gotta say, I for the past like 6 issues, I've been saying I really hope they stop with the 4 hours earlier, 2 hours later, 1 minute prior, like, and they did. I explained it in a specific order, but like, this was in order. It was A to B to C to D. I so very much appreciate that, because I'm not having to keep track of like, whose story are we in now? In terms of the actual story itself, bringing Wonder Woman to fight Medusa, I'm down with that. The kids being involved. Yeah, it really does close off a little bit of the world, like in a good way, of Wonder Woman. It's like, yeah, there's this cult that follows literal Medusa. Clearly she's going to be involved with that somewhat. And it just so happens that Batwoman's also on the case. And it's nice that they're like, yeah, no, we're going to cross over. We're going to do a thing. So, yeah, no, I'm definitely into that. Art-wise, J.H. Williams back on art. Nothing against, I believe it was Amy Reeder prior, but J.H. Williams just goes absolutely nutty with the layouts. And it is fantastic the entire time. It looks great. So, fantastic art there. Overall, I would say this one's like a good 7.5, and the only reason it's not any higher is because it is literally just the setup issue. It is just like, okay, we're going to get the team together. We're going to get these two together, and we're going to see the adventures that go on, but we don't actually have them together, and we haven't actually seen the adventures. So still waiting on that. But it is very good, 7.5. Look forward to the rest of the arc. Although next issue, I believe, is the 0 issue, which means not the rest of this arc. So get to it eventually. Birds of Prey number 12, written by Duane Swierczynski, art by Cliff Richards. Last issue left off with Poison Ivy and the rest of the Birds of Prey seemingly killing a CEO of some horrible company that does bad things to the environment. And then this issue opens up and she's like, oh no. Turns out we actually just shot him with a dart. But that dart has those toxin things in it, and if he ever does bad things again, Poison Ivy will activate the toxins. So At that point, they throw him down to the ground. They start leaving. They take apparently his chartered jet in order to get to their next location. And Poison Ivy's like, "Good job, team. We all did exactly what I planned. Now on to this oil rig that I have." And then Black Canary just punches her in the face and says, like, "Dear God, we are not your team. Like, you are literally blackmailing us to do this. You are a horrible person." And they start fighting, obviously, again, to a whole thing. And as they're going through it, Poison Ivy's trying to, like, call them out on, like, you put me as the supervillain because I'm messing with the status quo, but, like, you, Batgirl, wear your mask and elude the police. Katana, how many souls do you have in that sword of yours again? Like, yeah, you're all a little bit hypocritical here. And Black Canary, you killed your husband, which I suppose we're going to see more info on soon. And Starling, who's piloting the plane, is like, "All right, enough of this." And she just starts, like, tilting the plane all over, causing turbulence, throwing them around. And Poison Ivy's like, "I will murder you in there if you do that again." She's like, "Can't hear you." So at that point, everyone's like, "All right, fine. Poison Ivy's just telling them, you got to work with me. Whether you like it or not, I don't care if you think we're a team. We're still going to do this." So they all bail out of the plane. And as far as I can tell, the plane crashes into a oil rig. Like, they don't actually show it happening. They just show the oil rig exploding. But everyone's parachuting in, so I have to assume that's one right after another. So anyway, they all start swimming their way over to the oil rig. And apparently the plan is Starling's going to start bringing down the oil rig by overloading it. And everyone else is just going to go around cutting all the safety stuff. And Poison Ivy said specifically, like, "Look, that first explosion cleared them out. They all hopped on the life rafts. So there's not going to be any, like, oh no killing thing, okay? So everyone just do your job." And at that point, Black Canary, she makes her way down into a lower deck, and she sees not everybody's evacuated. There's still a bunch of people in there. She's like, "All right, call it off. There's people in here." And Poison Ivy's like, "Nope, keep going." To which point Starling then is like, I'm not going to do that. Stop." So Poison Ivy busts in, bashes her head into the control panel, and the whole thing starts exploding. Black Canary has to make a quick escape hatch for all the people still on board, and carries them all out into a life raft. And then later on, they go to Robinson Park in Gotham City, where there's just a doctor who I guess is good friends with Poison Ivy, and he's like helping her heal up or whatever. And at that point, Batgirl and Black Canary, based off an earlier conversation that wasn't important, they make the call of, like, "I'm going to go get Batman, and Batman's going to cure our toxin thing, so we don't have to work with Poison Ivy anymore." Okay? So they do their little signal. Black Canary causes a distraction, tries to hold him off while Batgirl makes her way over to Batman. And at that point, Poison Ivy just starts literally attacking the remaining birds of prey and starts wrapping them all up in their vines. And then Katana's like, "All right, that's enough of that." Slashes her in the back and, like, kills her, it seems, or at least severely wounds her. And she's like, "Good job, Katana. Killed everybody on the planet." And then Black Canary steps up and is like, "What did you do?" And she's like, "I killed one teammate instead of letting two teammates die. So screw me, I guess." So at that point, they look over Poison Ivy's seemingly dead body. I highly doubt it, but it's possible. And they say, "Man, this is not why I joined this team." And then next issue is a Zero issue. I mean, it's fine. It's a decent enough continuation of the last arc. Like, I don't know. I just kind of wish they would have went further with it, of just, like, building it up slowly, of, like, okay, now I'm forcing you to do this, and then this, and then this. But, like, it literally was at, okay, we shot a guy with some toxins that would kill him, still not killing him. Then we attacked an oil rig where we thought all the people were gone. Turns out they weren't gone, but then we still didn't let any of them die. And now all of a sudden it's just like, okay, goodbye. And I understand they're being blackmailed too. I understand that that's a thing they want to be free from, regardless of what Poison Ivy's doing. I don't know. It just seems like we're zooming through this arc for no particular reason. Like, it's just moving so quickly of, like, okay, we've only done 2 things, but we're already done with all of it now. So if there's more, if after the Zero issue, because I think Zero issue, I think it might be Black Canary's origin. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in this book. Unfortunately, I think it's okay, but it's not great by any means, and a lot of times it loses me in the between issues. So I'm hoping that it'll turn out a decent story from this, but I'm not going to be holding my breath. As for rating wise, it's like I'd say like a 6.5. The issue itself isn't that bad. It's just the worry of what comes afterwards. So 6.5, and we'll see where it goes. Catwoman number 12, written by Judd, Winick, art by Adriana, Melo. Last issue left off with Detective Alvarez and a bunch of sex workers being taken captive as Catwoman shows up late to the entire firefight. And this issue picks up immediately afterwards, where Gwen tries calling Catwoman, and she's like, I'm a little bit busy, Gwen. I'm going to call you back. Click. And she's like, oh, no, you did not. So at that point, Spark is making his way over to Catwoman saying like, hey, the cops are going to be there any second now. Like, that was a major firefight with a lot of casualties. You need to go. And she's like, hold on. I have an idea. She goes over to Detective Alvarez's car and sees that there's a phone inside that is set to a GPS tracker that is currently moving. So it's attached to Detective Alvarez. So he's like, all right, Spark, I need you to do something very important for me. And so he goes up on top of the GCPD building, bashes in the bat signal, draws in a cat logo, leaves a cell phone down on the ground, and then leaves. And at that point, Batman, of course, shows up, and he gets the cell phone, and he's like, what in the hell are you doing, Catwoman? So then we go over to the building where I think she calls herself Dollhouse. Dollhouse is, and they're unloading everybody, and Alvarez is like, you do understand that, like, you're going to get caught, right? There was, like, a massacre down there. You're not exactly stealthy. You are going to get caught. And Dollhouse is like, shut up. You this is why I like dolls. They don't talk back. You suck. And he justifies himself. He's like, oh, I create beauty. I do whatever. And I say himself. It's actually, I believe, a her. I'm honestly a little bit confused in that regard. But Catwoman then shows up, and they get into a fight. And the entire thing is basically Dollhouse explaining, hey, here's what I do. I am Dollhouse. My father was Dollmaker, who was in Detective Comics, and my real name is Matilda. So yes, it is a she. Additionally, Dollmaker is apparently the son of Toyman, which I don't remember being a thing, but apparently is a thing. So it's a whole family of people doing really messed up shit. And now Matilda is the most recent one. So they continue to get into a fight. Catwoman's running through all of like the doll displays, and apparently Dollhouse just doesn't care anymore because she's just firing willy-nilly throughout every single one of the displays until finally Catwoman manages to get the upper hand and almost knocks her out. However, she manages to fire a few knockout darts into Catwoman. At which point then Alvarez is like, stop what you're doing, you're under arrest. And he's like, oh my god, this is so stupid. So as she's about to bash in the head of Alvarez, we hear the vroom coming from outside a door, and Batman in his Batmobile busts in. And at that point, Matilda's like, all right, I can't deal with Batman, I'm out. And Dollhouse just leaves. And then during the firefight, this place is literally caught on fire. Alvarez and Batman get all of the people who were drugged but not yet turned into dolls out of the building. And he's like, well, Catwoman, I guess, is the one we should thank for this. Do you have any idea what's going on with her, Batman? Batman's like, I have no idea. She's messed up. So Catwoman apparently gets back to her place, hops in the tub, and is just like, okay, I did good today. I was a good person today. Is this really the type of person I am? Because that was really hard, and I don't feel that great about it. Also, should I really be having a teammate? Because, like, Spark is not okay with me being a good person either. This is all very complicated. So then we cut over to Spark, and like 2 issues ago, we had the reveal that he was working with the corrupt cops in some degree. So he walks into his apartment, or at least he walks somewhere. Apparently, Catwoman texted him, And he's met with a gun, and it's like, you're working with the corrupt cops, aren't you? And she's like, no, Cat, I'm not. It was all a misunderstanding. I'm actually working with you. It's totally cool. To which point, the gun steps out of the shadows, and it's actually Gwen. And Gwen shoots Spark dead and says, like, yeah, she would have believed you. That's the problem. So then she hops on the phone, calls up someone, and says, like, hey, thanks for the tip. I've done what needed to be done. And on the other end is Penguin saying, like, oh, no problem. Always happy to help a friend in need. But remember, I don't hand out favors lightly. Wah, wah, wah. So, yeah. Gwen is now in servitude, or at least owes the Penguin, and Spark is dead. He lasted for exactly one arc. R.I.P. Spark. I think I remember saying, like, he's not going to make it out of this for very long. Surprising, though, he didn't get to turn on Catwoman, so that's something. So, I think it's fine. I like the reveal that it is a direct link to Dollmaker because it is very similar of a character. I don't recall if that was a person who was in the Detective Comics arc, if there was a Matilda. Certainly didn't look like that, I'll tell you that much for sure. Overall, though, it was just a very fast-paced issue between the multiple fight scenes and getting out all the people. It just flew by in terms of, okay, well, now we're just kind of done with this arc. So, not bad, not great. Art-wise, it's good. And nothing to write home about, but also nothing awful. Like, each of the characters look like the characters. So, yeah, no, it's just an average issue overall. I wish I had more to say about it. I'd say 6.5. It's okay. Not great. But, you know, it's Catwoman. When has it ever needed to be anything else? Nightwing number 12, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Andre Guinaldo. Last issue left off with Paragon killing several members of his own group and then going to visit Detective Nai, who only hates Nightwing so much because his romantic partner, Chris, was killed in a Nightwing-related incident, and he blames Nightwing for it. Anyway, this issue picks up with the entire multiple homicides thing of the Republic of Tomorrow, the people of Paragon runs, being reported in, and Nightwing would have made it before the police if he was on the opposite side of the river, but unfortunately he's showing up 2 minutes late. So the police are already there, and he's having to look in from the outside at what exactly happened here. And Detective Nye's there, and he's like, all right, well, everybody got what they need, I'm going to go home. And as he starts walking out, Nightwing grabs him and be like, this is Paragon. I know you think it might be me, but it's not me, it's Paragon. And I was like, yeah, I know it's Paragon. He literally showed up at my apartment and told me where this thing was. And Nightwing's like, why would he do that unless it's a trap? Oh, no. And then all of a sudden the sewer that this happened in starts caving in. And Paragon is next to Nightwing, and the rest of the GCPD is separated from the fight. And he's like, oh, no, you're not able to save them. That's not for you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to slit your throat. That's what's going to happen now. So Nightwing starts fighting back, and he apparently has a new upgrade to his excrement stick of like electrified diodes on the end, which is something. Meanwhile, the cops inside are like, okay, everyone's fine, everyone's good, great. We're trapped in here, but the fire department's coming. And Detective Nye's like, nah, Paragon, he's going to get away. I got to find a way out of here. And he grabs a flashlight and some extra clothes, and he makes his way through the small little crevice in order to squeeze his way in. So at this point, the fight's still continuing, and Paragon's revealing some stuff about himself. Also, how Nightwing managed to figure out like the whole thing is that the two guys who were killed and framed to have been killed by Nightwing, they wanted out of the group because Nightwing saved them all the way back in like issue 2 from a thing that happened. And there was actually a third person in the car who was Paragon. And once they realized, like, wait a minute, Nightwing's actually a cool dude, we shouldn't be against these guys, they wanted out of the group. And Paragon was like, nope, I can't let you do that. It'll make me seem weak. So he killed them and then framed Nightwing for it. And they were like friends, too. So it was especially hard for Paragon to make that choice. So anyway, the fight continues, and he's just like, all right, well, congratulations, Nightwing, you figured it out. Anyway, and he like shoves his head into some sewer water. And then Nightwing gets the upper hand and shoves his head into some sewer water. And they're like, see, Nightwing, we're not so different. We both want what's best for the city. But my resoluteness will mean that I have to kill you. And at that point, both of them take a tumble down in the sewer. They make their way out, like past the release valves and stuff like that, and out into the main area. And at that point, the GCPD are there waiting. And all guns are drawn on both of them, but mostly on Paragon. And Paragon's like, everybody who doesn't want to die better leave now. And Detective Nye's there, and he's like, everyone keep your guns on him. He's not going to do anything. And he's like, oh, Detective, how little you know about me. And he starts up his like electrified stuff, to which Nightwing, as far as I can tell, just elbows him in the face and says like, that's enough of that talking. And he's no longer an issue. And all the cops are looking at Nightwing, and it's just like, we should arrest you, but you kind of got a scratch on your leg, so maybe we'll just let you offer the warning this time. And they let Nightwing go. And then we get the epilogue stuff, where Dick Grayson's talking to Lucius Fox, and he's like, hey, remember how I wanted to buy Amusement Mile, but they wouldn't give me any funding? I want you to take my entire trust fund and use that as the funding to show them that I really mean business. And he's like, that's an extraordinarily stupid idea, Dick. And he's like, I know. Do it anyway. And then he falls asleep because he's had such a rough time. Cut over to the Iceberg Casino. Mr. Combustible walks in. Penguin is freaking out. Mr. Combustible's like, what's up? And he's like, dude, someone killed all of the mob in Philadelphia. Like, all the mob. And frankly, I'm thinking they're going to come here. And he's like, well, why are you worried about a mob killer? Like, you dealt with them before. And he's like, no, it's not just a normal mob killer. This is Lady Shiva showing up. To which point Mr. Combustible says, like, I'm going to get out of Gotham. Goodbye. And then he just leaves. And then we go to Sonia Branch's apartment, the one woman who was in Tony Zuko's daughter, a.k.a. the guy who killed Nightwing's parents, and also in charge of the bank loan thing. And Dick goes over and she's like, hey, I'm sorry I act like such a dick to you. Like, you were the one who voted yes, and I should have understood that. And she's like, no, I didn't vote yes. I told you I did, but I lied. Like, I don't think it would be good for us to work together at all. And he's like, oh. Well, I already talked to the rest of the bank, and because I use my own money, they're totally good to fund it, so we're going to be seeing each other a lot. And at that point, Sonya's like, yeah, all right. And she gives him a kiss on the cheek and says, I guess we better make the most of it. And Nightwing's like, well, this is going to be interesting. And that's where we leave off. It's good. I like it. I still feel like Paragon, like they had an idea there for an interesting villain in terms of like a rallying cry, because there's so many anti-vigilante things of just like, no, you don't understand this city, I understand this city. He had something. He had a little extra something to him where I think they could have made him like almost like a cult leader sort of thing. And to be fair, he was a leader of a cult, but he didn't go far enough. I don't think they didn't play with that enough, because literally as soon as Nightwing shows up and beats up the cult once, everybody's out. Literally everybody's just like, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, there should have been some people who still like, yeah, we believe in the cause even if it means our lives. But no, that was just Paragon. I don't know, it just felt like a little bit of a wasted opportunity there, but that's just me rewriting it afterwards. In terms of what they wanted to do, it was fine, it was good enough. Overall, I would give this one, I give it a 7. I do actually like the art style more on this than I think I have like the previous 2 issues. It's been good throughout, but I think the coloring finally got to where it needed to be. The first page especially, I don't know, it's a real nice image of Dick just going over the skyline to get to the destination. It's just a solid image. So 7 overall, and we'll see what happens next week. Red Hood and the Outlaws, number 12, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Timothy Greene II. Last issue left off with the framing device of Roy telling his captors and apparently Starfire's sister, Commander, which that's a name, the story of how he got captured and a bunch of other secret stuff. And this issue just continues out. He's like, all right, well, where was I? So they had just been attacked, and Starfire's looking all serious, but Arsenal comes in just like, hey, smile, I'll be your friend. And he's like, I recognize you're trying to cheer me up, but like there's a lot going on right now, Arsenal. And he's like, right, but you're cute. And she's like, okay, thank you. Like, yep, I'm cheered up. Cool. So Then he makes a 50 Shades of Orange joke. I don't know what to make of that. I don't hate it. So at that point, one of the first mates comes up and wants to talk to Starfire as Arsenal goes and talks to the person like running the engines. And the first mate's like, hey, Corey, so maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with humans because like this is only going to end in disaster for him. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Corey says, I went to Earth because I wanted to be alone, but like I met him and he is literally like the sweetest guy. So, hey, it might work out. I'm never going to hurt them. You know, I'm not going to leave. So they're my friends. And at that point, first mate's like, okay, if you say so. So then we go over to Jason, who's talking to his date, who I've already forgotten the name of, and Isabel. And basically she's just like, so do you always go to space? And he's like, no, this is new to me. I am a vigilante though, but like street level. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. So guess we're out here together. And just like, yeah. And then the scene ends. So then we get back to Arsenal, who's talking to the her name's Kitten. I'll just say Kitten. And she's like, no, seriously, try it. And she's like, that's stupid. Why would that ever work? And he's like, no, you can redirect the engine flow to power up the life bay and blah, blah. It's just showing that Arsenal's super smart, even on alien technology. And she does it and it works. And everyone's like, wow, great job, Arsenal. But at that point, the Blight attacks and they literally teleport into the ship because the shields are down. And they fire off a gun that would teleport Corey away, but Roy jumps in the way and gets teleported instead. And that's how he ends up here. And at that point, Commander's like, I'm sorry, hold on, go back. You're sleeping with my sister? And she's like, that's what you took out of that? And she's like, sorry, I didn't think she would demean herself so much. So then the Blight steps up and it's just like, Commander, you are technically our prisoner as well. And we've given you a lot of leeway here, but it seems like you think you're in charge. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Were you able to get any info out of him? Because I was able to get info out of him. I think you kind of suck and you need me. And at that point, Roy's like, oh yeah, that reminds me. I came here for a reason because I let you capture me. And he tackles Commander and then they both get teleported out because apparently earlier on when he was in the med bay, he got injected with a tracer so that they always were able to find where he was and could teleport him out. So then they fly their ship like right next to the mothership of the Blight, so that way they can't attack them without attacking themselves. And they just chill there for a second. And Starfire talks to her sister, and the sister breaks down and is just like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. I had to pretend that I was working with them. And Starfire's like, I get it. It's cool. I forgive you. And she's like, but even for all those part where I sold you into slavery? And she's like, yep. I forgive you. We're good. And they have a touching moment. It's just like, okay, but like we need to go down and we need to save our planet. God only knows what's going on down there. And then we see what's going on down there, which is the entire race is being used to basically, you're not seeing an alien where the guy like spits up the alien embryo. It's like it's gestating inside of him. That's what they're doing to these other races. And we see the Blight is walking around just like, yes, that's why we're here for all these Tamaranians, but who the hell are you? And we see a literal just human guy whose name is just Colonel, and he's super old and his wife is next to him already dead. And they're basically asking him, so why are you here on Tamaran? And the Colonel says like, all right, well, if you'll not torture me, just let me die. I'll tell you, it's because of the 13. To which point the Blight says like, the 13? That doesn't exist. And it better not exist, because if it did exist, the Omniverse would be doomed. And then he kills the guy. So we're setting up for future arcs. Be ready for that. Cut back to Jason and Roy who are talking, and Jason's like, Roy, if you're going through a hard time, like you can talk about it. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I had to deal with all of my heroin shit on my own, so I kind of just laugh everything off now. Let's not get serious on the spaceship, okay? Let's not do that right now. So at that point, Corey and I'm going to keep saying Commander, despite the fact that I hate it. They all get locked and loaded. They make their way through a portal. And it's just like, all right, we're going to go do this on our own. And hey, guys, if I die, avenge the hell out of me. And then they go off to free their planet. That's the issue. I like it. I think it's solid. I think it justified the framing device. My only complaint is that everyone, if you were listening to me talk about Teen Titans, you know that I really don't like the way Kid Flash is written, and that he just talks for the sake of talking. And I feel like a lot of this is that, where people are just talking for the sake of talking. And in some cases it's okay because it's character development, but in other cases it's just like that scene between like Isabel and Jason. Like, we had that scene. We already knew that scene. Like, yeah, no, the space adventure. It just felt like for the sake of, hey, we need to show these guys talking for some reason. So, yeah, it's that's my only real critique with it. Overall, though, I do like this arc. It's turning Corey into a very well-defined character of like how she feels, what she feels her responsibilities are towards her friends, towards her planet, towards her family. Very well written in that regard. Yeah, I really don't have much more to say about it. I'll just rate it honestly, I'll give it like a 7.5. I actually am really enjoying this arc, which is saying a lot considering the rest of this book. Supergirl number 12, written by Michael Greene and Mike Johnson, art by Mahmud Asrar. Last issue left off with the Silver Banshee and her family, and Supergirl was like, no, I have to be alone. I can't put you in danger. And she flies away. And then this issue opens up with her immediately not being alone because she went to go visit Superman in his Fortress of Solitude, which is in the Arctic, and they make a specific point of, wait a minute, that's not what's in continuity right now. And then they say, check out Action Comics 13 in order to see what happens. So that one hasn't been released yet, so we'll get there. Anyway, they're looking at the bottled city of Kandor, and she's like, I went there once as a kid. So cool. Now they're all in stasis and in a bottle, and this sucks. And Superman's like, okay, so do you believe me that I'm your cousin now? Like, are we cool? And she's like, I believe that you believe it, but I still have my doubts. And basically this is just an extended talk scene of like, hey, look, Supergirl, you can stay here if you want because, it's technically like Krypton, right? And she's like, no, this is like a museum of Krypton. This isn't Krypton itself, but I appreciate it. But yeah, look, all I want is to figure out like, why am I here now? Like, what happened? What's going on? And Superman's like, well, here's the thing. My records in this like construct thing only go back 5 years, but I discovered that your ship was basically just orbiting around the yellow sun for all that time. So we actually, like, you got supercharged. It took me forever to get my powers going because I had them like filtered through the atmosphere, but you got just raw stuff. So you are incredibly powerful. And also, when you came down to Earth, part of like your ship broke up and broke off, and it landed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's something as well. And I haven't gone check it out, but maybe we can go check it out together. And Supergirl's like, no, I'd rather go by myself. And he's like, yeah, you're like super powerful and you don't have any control over your powers. So I really for the sake of the world and for yourself, I really don't want to leave you alone. She's like, I knew it. You don't trust me. The only reason here is you want me under your control. And she's like, no, dude, we're cool. We're cool. I'm trying to do what's best for everybody here. And she's like, here's the thing. If you don't let me go, you're going to have to fight me. And I'm a lot better with my powers than I was before. And then Superman's like, just go. And then Supergirl just flies off and she's like, I shouldn't have done that, but I needed to do that. Oh, this sucks. So she's just flying around the Atlantic Ocean because she didn't actually get the coordinates. She's just like, oh, it's in the Atlantic Ocean. How big could that be? Until finally she hears like a little voice calling out in Kryptonian. And she's like, is that Kal-El? No, that's something else. And she goes underwater and she's like, gotta hold my breath like I did out in space. If I breathe out down here, I will actually die. So she's holding her breath as she gets further down. She uses the energy in her body to actually make herself glow so that you can see down here in the deep ocean. And as she approaches this voice, she's attacked by a whole bunch of, as far as I can tell, super advanced leeches. And they start like grabbing around her, like, you've seen this kind of thing before, wink, wink. And they start like grabbing around her wrists and ankles. And then she starts fighting back, but she's like, oh, can't lose my breath. I'm just going to use my heat vision. And she blasts all of them away. But then one of them sneaks up and gets like around her neck. And then more and more get her. And she is eventually surprised to the point where she has to let out a gasp of air, and therefore her lungs fill with water, and she starts sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And then at that point, her eyes shoot open. She's like, what? Oh, okay. I guess I don't need to breathe anymore, as well as eat or sleep. I don't know what's going on with me. So she just gets up and walks along the ocean floor until she comes across what seems to be her own fortress of solitude, where it's calling out her name and speaking in Kryptonian. And she's like, oh boy, this is it. It looks like it's literally been built into the rock. And it doesn't seem like it has a door, but it has like a portal. And she walks through the portal and she's like, it was like an emotional sensation walking through that, a memory saying like, I'm home. I'm so happy to be here. And then a voice starts calling out saying like, oh, well, the voice that was originally calling to her starts trailing off. It just gets quieter. And then another voice chimes in saying like, oh, thank God you're here. That voice was driving me insane. Anyway, sorry about the leeches outside. Seems that the radiation on this place may have sent them into an evolutionary overdrive. But hey, at least we're both here now. And Kara makes her way through and she's like, I know that voice. Where do I know that voice from? And as she steps into the main room, she's like, now, before you get to punching me, just know that all I ever wanted was to understand you. And thanks to this place, I finally do. And then Supergirl's like, ah, crap, you're Simon Tycho. And we see Simon Tycho from like issue 3 has gotten back a new gooey looking body. And he's like, hey, trust me, I've changed. Huh? He doesn't look like he changed, but that's where we leave off. I like it. I think that this is definitely a setup issue. This is definitely a thing of like, okay, we got her away from Silver Banshee and now we're going on to our own thing here. Mind you, I am still salty about her leaving Silver Banshee, but regardless, if we're having to do this, it's nice that now she has her own Fortress of Solitude and we're building up to that. Simon Tycho, he's been laid out several times that he was coming back. I'm not surprised at all by that. I think my only real qualm with the issue is that it does a lot of character development for Kara, and that's not the bad part. What it's failing at, though, is it's like this entire issue is like, or I'm going to fight you, Superman, and the Superman's like, all right, I'm not going to fight you, so just go. And then they did like the leech thing, but like the leech thing wasn't even a fight. The leech thing was just like oh, she finds out that she can breathe underwater now, or doesn't have to breathe more appropriately. So it just kept on teasing the thing of like, oh, there's going to be no, we're not going to. And maybe that was the point, but I don't know. It just felt a little bit blue balls for me. So overall, though, I give this issue, art is pretty good overall. I really do like the expressions most of the time. Clark looks a bit weird, but that's just because I have such a specific vision in mind for Clark that in Mahmud's art style, it just is a little bit, he looks a bit young, I think. So overall, I'm going to give it a 7.5. I do like it. I'm not trying to bash it. It's mostly good. Just a few little things here or there that bring it down that little extra like half point. Green Lantern number 12, written by Geoff Johns, art by Renato Guedes and Jim Calafiore. Last issue left off with Sinestro and Hal finding the Book of Black, getting visions of the future, and then teleporting into a family dinner with Black Hand. This issue picks up with Black Hand being like, oh, hey, Book of Black, that's exactly what I needed, thank you. And he opens it up and starts looking through it, and he's like, what do you guys do in my book? And he shows them what's written inside, and it's just the Green Lantern symbol, and Hal Jordan is not your enemy, written over and over and over again. And it just says every page looks like this. And Sinestro's like, why would it say that? And he's like, I don't know. So at that point, he starts getting pissed off. He's like, all right, well, enough is enough. Death is at hand. And Hal steps in and uses his ring to fry every synapse in Black Hand's head, which seems like murder, but of course he's already dead, so technically not. And as his brain starts rewiring, we see all the zombies have like basically frozen for the time. And he's like, they're trying to think like, okay, what do we do? And it's like, well, in order to take out these zombies, the only way to purposely do it is that we need to combine our Green Lantern ring with any other lantern power. So how about we call up Carol with her Star Sapphire ring? And They try calling Carol. Carol's on the phone with Amanda Waller saying, like, I don't even have the ring anymore, as she's looking at the ring. And they're like, well, we can't get to her. Probably because there's so many Black Lanterns messing with our signal. Better get outside. And they see just a whole horde of zombies outside. And again, they're not doing anything at the moment. They're just standing there. Meanwhile, we cut over to the Guardians, who are talking about their master plan of the Third Army. And they basically say, like, here's the deal. Blackest Night happened, and then all those different Lantern Corps started, like, battling with each other, and, like, it's caused chaos across the galaxy. So we need to undo the fact that we brought lanterns into existence, and therefore we need to get rid of all the Earth Lanterns, because they're the biggest issue. So Hal is currently, like, unable to use his ring without Sinestro, because they don't know about the other thing that happened where he got a good ring back. So he's not a problem. John Stewart apparently blew up Mogo, and so he's got guilt over that. Kyle's doing his own thing over in Green Lantern New Guardians, and he's only really concerned with Ganthet, which Ganthet says he'll take care of himself. And their thing for Guy Gardner is that they're going to make him think that he's now the greatest Green Lantern, thus pumping up his ego to the point where he's never going to try to do anything that undermines that. And the Guardians will be like, well, all right. And also they said, like, oh, also we got a ping off of Sinestro's ring that led us to this sector, and we found the secret planet of the Indigo Tribe, which is really the one that we were missing the whole time. So, hooray! Now our Third Army will come in, they will replace the Lanterns, and they will replace everyone. So, that's the Guardians' plan. Meanwhile, the zombies are still frozen because Black Hand's head is still all gooey, and they just pull out some, like, Green Lantern construct, like, flamethrowers to try to burn away all the zombies. But at this point, Black Hand's woke back up. They start attacking the Lanterns. And Black Hand's like, all right, hey, let me see that book again. I want to get what exactly is going on here? And as he starts looking through it, he finally gets to a page that's, like, still being written. And it says, Hal Jordan will be the greatest. And then we don't get to see what is at the bottom. But Black Hand's like, no, that can't happen. So then we get zombie fight between Sinestro and Hal. And they're just using a whole bunch of, like, swords and chainsaws and whatever. And they're like, hey, maybe we should just fly up because these zombies can't fly. And he's like, oh, yeah, good idea. So they just fly up ever so briefly. And Black Hand's finally coming out. And he's like, oh, you'll never be able to take them all on. But then Sinestro's like, all right, I didn't want to do this, but I'm a Green Lantern now, whatever. So he reaches through a portal, pulls out his old Yellow Lantern power battery and says, like, if we blow this thing up with our Green Lantern energy, it's going to be the same as using two different colors, thus taking out the Black Lanterns. And Hal's like, so I guess that means you're committing to the green? He's like, no, I could easily make another one if I wanted to. Like, this means nothing to me, but hey, we can take out the Black Lanterns. So they focus all their willpower, they blow up the power battery, and it completely demolishes all the zombies. And Black Hand, he's still left standing as the Green Lanterns, having had used all their willpower, stumble to the ground with 0 power level. Black Hand steps up and he's like, okay, you can't destroy me. I know you can't do that, but the book is saying that Hal Jordan will be the greatest Black Lantern. Dun, dun, dun. So there's an annual in 2 weeks, and it says read that to see the Rise of the Third Army stuff, which is the beginning of that arc, actually. So I like it. It's good. I don't think there's any real flaws to this issue. I think my only real criticism is the fact of, like, they went on that zombie fight, and then we're just like, hey, why don't we just fly up? And I can understand that, like, they were used to actual Black Lanterns, like, people with rings rather than just zombies beforehand. And I think the people with rings were able to fly. I could be wrong on that. Again, haven't read Darkest Night, but I don't know. That was my only thing where it's just like, you just wanted to draw some zombie fight, didn't you? I don't oppose it, but the writing definitely took a hit in order to make that happen. So, yeah, no, solid all throughout. I like the art. They're setting up. It's weird in that it is its own arc, but it is such a low-scale stakes sort of thing that it's mostly just set up. Because we're doing the whole Guardians thing, we're doing the whole Third Army thing, we're doing the whole Hal Jordan will apparently be a Black Lantern thing. Whole lot of extra stuff. It's mostly just set up. So, with that in mind, I'm going to give this one... I give it 7.5. It's still very well written. It probably would be higher if it wasn't for just those little things, but it's good. It's a solid chapter to a solid arc and a solid run. I have no real qualms with it at all, and I'm looking forward to seeing. Actually, we have a zero issue after the annual. I'm not sure what's going to be in the zero issue yet, but I guess we'll see. Green Lantern Corps number 12, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Fernando Pasarin. Last issue we left off with the entire Corps fighting against the Alpha Lanterns, and then they introduced this giant kaiju-sized Manhunter thing, and then this issue continues from there, but it's basically just fight scene the issue. Like, it's just a whole thing. So Varix, one of the Alpha Lanterns, is holding Guy and John captive, and he was the one who had like a crisis of conscience of like, are we the baddies? Are we actually the bad guys here? But he's basically telling them like, hey, shut down your giant kaiju, and he's like, no. And then just so much fighting. And I do have to be critical here is that I have no sense of scale for this. Like, it's cutting all over the battlefield, all these different people. I genuinely cannot follow A to B to C to D here. So at some point, all the Alpha Lanterns are like, okay, we got to go deal with the kaiju thing. So all Alpha Lanterns come here, and they just like fly inside of it and blow it up from the inside. And that takes care of that. And then they're like, all right, everybody else, you're all getting depowered. And they depower everybody's lantern rings, including Guy and John's, and they all hit 0. And it's like, all of you are unfit to be Green Lanterns. We are charging all of you with treason. But before that, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, you're sentenced for execution. Let's go. And as Varix holds them, like handcuffs them, he feeds them just a tiny bit of green energy juice, enough to get, their willpower back up. And at that point, they then spring a surprise attack on the Alpha Lanterns, and the Alpha Lanterns are like, oh, what is this? How'd they get free? And then Varix turns on them as well, and literally just like explodes all their rings and such. And also, it seems to be just their bodies. Like, they're dead. They're straight up gone. And so they're all laying crumpled on the floor. Varix is looking at them, and Guy's like, hey, thanks for saving our ass. And he's just like, no, you guys aren't. Like, these were my teammates. Like, they were good people. They got corrupted by power, though. And I guess that means, like, I got corrupted by power as well. And they're like, no, Varix, you had your conscience. Like, you were the one who did the right thing in the end. Clearly, you were not that corrupted. And he's like, yeah, but I could have done something earlier. So an Alpha Lantern has to seek justice, no matter what that justice is. And Varix turns his Alpha ring on himself and blows his own head off. Like, pretty gruesomely. It's just like blood and a stub there. And so his ring flies off and goes away. At that point, Guy and John, since they're the only one with any willpower yet, and they're stuck in the science cells, they get all the lanterns together and they all fly out of the science cells. And as they're flying out, there's a voice that sounds like it's coming from a ring saying, let me out. And they all lose power for a second, but then they get it back, and this is like, ring, what was that? And it's just like, oh, it's no clue. And it's like, huh, all right, well, we'll have to deal with that later. But they all fly out, and then we see at the Crypt of the Green Lanterns, they're giving a service for not only Varix, but all the Alpha Lanterns, because they did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. Despite the fact that they may have taken it too far, they did what they believed was best for the Green Lantern Corps. So they're all honored with statues. And Guy makes the comment of like, the list of people who die from being a Green Lantern gets longer every day, huh? And John's like, yep. So then we get to the Guardians, and the Guardians are like, well, that worked out pretty much as well as it possibly could have. Our evil machinations would have been put in danger if the Alpha Lanterns were still around, but now they're not. And we're going to go ahead and destroy their Alpha rings as well. So they will never be able to fight against our third army. So then we see the scraps of the kaiju being brought back down into the foundry under Oa. And it's just like, well, this is yet another one of the Guardians' failures. Just wonder which one's going to be next. And then we see the Guardians watching them being like, yes, who indeed? And that's where we leave off. I liked it. I think it was a solid thing. Here's the thing, though. they only really hit this point of just total corruption at the very end here, but it's more of a going by the book sort of issue. It's like anyone who betrays the Green Lanterns must be executed. That's in their rules, and that's a good enough rule on its own. But then it's like, okay, the Green Lanterns, what does that mean? Well, that means the code of the Green Lanterns. And if you turn against the Alpha Lanterns, you're turning against the rule of the Green Lanterns, because there's the rules personified. And it was kind of like one of the Isaac Asimov stories of the laws of robotics, where it's like, if these rules aren't tuned perfectly, there's some sort of unforeseen circumstance. In this case, it makes it so that the Alpha Lanterns see anybody who speaks against them as a traitor to the core. And it's good. It was a good story in that regard. I do think, though, that if they wanted to play up the power corrupts sort of angle, they could have spent a bit more time on that. Because it didn't really seem like we got that so much as we just got man, you guys are kind of it's just the internal affairs. It's just literally all the cops turning against internal affairs at this point. It wasn't that they were corrupt. It was that they were following the rules too closely and didn't have any wiggle room for special circumstances. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I did enjoy it. I really did like the arc as a whole. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I really did enjoy it. It also says tune in at the end of this month for the Green Lantern Annual, where we'll find out what that crazy-ass voice from that ring was. So be sure to tune into that if you haven't been watching Green Lantern. Beyond that, I'm excited for seeing. I think this all ties into Third Army stuff once we get back from the Zero issue, so we'll see how that goes. In fact, no, actually, the Zero issue does not tie into the Third Army stuff. But as soon as we get back, we'll see what happens in the Guardians' final master plan or whatever. Captain Atom number 12, written by J.T. Krul, art by Freddie Williams II, though they are both credited as storytellers. Last issue, we left off with Captain Atom had been making things happen, apparently subconsciously, of granting people's deepest desires. And apparently they all come with a monkey's paw sort of twist. Because the guy who got a childhood toy chest or something caught on fire. So this issue picks up with Captain Atom being what is reality? Objective, subjective? I mean, in the end, I think it's subjective. And we see Nathaniel, a.k.a. the human half of Captain Atom, cuddling up with Renato on the couch. And, playing a little footsie, and he's like, oh my god, I've been missing this for so long. This feels great. And her phone starts going off, and she's like, man, what? Just put it to vibrate. And she's like, oh, you just got to tune it out. I got to leave it on ring, though, in case something happens. And she looks at the phone, and there are 5 missed calls and 7 missed texts from Dr. Scott Alexander. And it's like, oh, uh-oh. So then we cut to inside the Continuum, where the scientist is still on fire, and they've got a fire extinguisher. They put him out, and it's okay, we've got you. And he seems fine. He's not burned or anything like that. But then he's like a trick candle in that he just reignites all over again. And he's like, oh, it's all my fault. This was me. I did this to me. So then we see a flashback of his father for punishing him for hitting his sister, taking away that toy chest of his. And so he goes downstairs into the basement to blow off some steam, and he sees a lighter on the table, and he's like, I hate you so much. And he takes the lighter and he looks at the gas main for the house, and he's like, I hate you all. So dude blew up his family, if you didn't quite get that. So then we cut over to Dr. Magala, who's still unconscious. He's still in a catatonic state, and they literally can't wake him up. But Dr. Alexander, Scott, comes in, dragging along the woman who appears to be his mother, but he's like, no, that's not my mom. And he's just like, hey, my mom died 20 years ago. I don't know who this woman is. I want you to run some tests on her. So they run some tests, and the doctors are like, that she literally doesn't have any bones or organs or anything. The most we can describe of what's inside of her is just filler. And he's like, I knew it. Unbelievable. Captain Atom did this. And they're like, you sure? And he's just like, yeah, she made this fraud, this fake, this pale imitation of my mother. And the mom's sitting there like, oh my god, I'm not real, but I feel real. So of course we have that crisis as well. Meanwhile, inside Magala's mind, He's flying at past light speed throughout the universe with Captain Atom, and he's explaining to Magala, like, yeah, look, if we fly faster than the speed of light, we can actually reach the edge of the universe, like the edge of what the Big Bang has reached out to. And turns out there was a universe before us, and this Big Bang is just, the massive amount of energy is just wiping out all matter beyond it, and there's literally no way to ever know what it is. And Magala's like, I mean, we have to know something about it, right? And he's like, Captain Adam's like, no, it's gone. There is literally no way you can ever know anything about the universe that existed beforehand. And Magala hates that, the fact that he's unable to know this, like actually unable to. So then we get to Nathaniel and Renita. They're driving in, and Renita's like, this seems a lot like a Captain Atom sort of thing. And he's like, well, that's not, there's been a lot of things that have seemed like Captain Atom things, and I'm not doing anything, so no, I don't think it's a Captain Atom thing. At least if it is, it's not a me thing. I'm not doing it. I'm not even linked to the guy anymore. But as they get up, they see this blue glow enveloping the entire facility, and it's just like, yeah, okay, this is a Captain Atom thing. Renita, stay outside. Nate's running in, and he's going to play hero, despite the fact he doesn't have any powers. But as he jumps and leaps his way across some fires that are breaking out throughout the facility, he finally gets in to where Captain Atom's being held, and he's like, hey, I was having a good life. You just couldn't resist messing that up, could you? Oh, well. And he puts his hand to the glass as Captain Atom wakes up and also puts his hand to the glass, and they reform again and become one whole Captain Atom. And he's like, all right. Wakes up Magala, puts the guy who's on fire out, and he leaves the mom alone for now. But he's like, yeah, what I was doing in my unconscious was I was just reaching out to people to grant their wishes, like the things they wanted the most. But their subconscious got in the way of that, and they weren't determined to get what they wanted. Their subconscious were determined to get what they felt like they deserved. So, yeah. So anyway, Renita comes in first, talks to Scott, and says, like, hey, Scott, what's going on? It's like, Captain Atom made this horrible monstrosity of a human being. And Captain Atom comes in being like, hey, I hope you know this wasn't intentional. He's like, it never is with you, is it? Look, just get rid of it. I don't even want to see it anymore. He doesn't even say any last words to her. But then Captain Atom goes in and talks to the mom, and she's like, I feel real, and I love him. Yet, I mean, how is that any different? Like, I don't understand. What's wrong with me? Why am I not allowed to live? As he's basically just slowly unmaking her, just takes her apart atom by atom. And her last things are like, shouldn't that count for something? And he's like, yeah, you would think it would. So at that point, Renita, she's upset. She's heartbroken because Nathaniel's gone again, becoming Captain Atom. Captain Atom sees her crying, and so he's like, I needed this human compassion. I needed to be with somebody. But now, like, I realize that I've been ignoring who I have to be with these powers. And he just gets up and straight off flies to the moon. And he's like, I'm no longer a man. I don't belong with man anymore. I have to stay alone. So, yeah. As far as I know, that's the end. We have a Zero issue still coming up. I don't know if that's going to be technically his origin or if that's going to be like a capper on the whole story. But Captain Atom's no longer with humanity, and we'll see how that turns out. So again, this whole series I have been enjoying. The art style is so out there and so wild. Sometimes it does take some time to get used to, but the story itself has always had a philosophical thing to say. It's getting into this thing of like man versus God and where Captain Atom falls in that boundary. And it's genuinely just a good story. I've liked it from the beginning. So this particular issue, it doesn't do a whole lot, but as like this big, decision that Captain Atom has to make of rejoining himself together, I did enjoy that, of him really breaking down like, why should I? Why don't I deserve that? Don't I deserve some happiness after everything? So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give it I'm going to have to say like an 8. I really do enjoy it. And I would give it higher if a little bit more like happened. If like, because yeah, he left humanity, but honestly, that was a literal one panel last page thing. So didn't really feel like that monumentous of a decision that he made. It kind of felt almost on like, oh, okay, I'm just going to leave now, bye. So 8, still very good. And we will see how the true finale comes next month. DC Universe Presents number 12, written by Fabian Nicieza, art by Jorge Jimenez, aka Kid Flash, the one-shot. So, they get into this story later on, like Kid Flash explains everything that happened, but basically in Teen Titans, they went to this mystery island that had some dinosaurs on it, and then they came back via a whole thing, and apparently the subject for this book is that when they left, some dinosaur-human hybrids came back with them. Okay? Just accept that, because I have no other way to explain it. So we open up, we're in like a Chinatown sort of area, and the three dino people are like, oh boy, let's go and have an adventure here, guys. Let's go have some fun. And they make their way through Chinatown and are basically just like absentmindedly terrorizing people. Like they're just kind of messing with everybody around. And at this point, the one guy, Steg, they don't look like dinosaurs, mind you, but there's one who's like a pterodactyl, and she can at least fly. But let's see here. Their names are Steg, Terex, and I think it's just Dak. I don't know. Regardless, Steg, he is pushing around all the people. He's like, get away from me, you mammals. And at this point, they start making their way through, and there's this whole commotion. And Kid Flash steps out of a Chinese restaurant, and he's like, oh, well, wonder what's going on here. And he zooms around and looks at people's phones that were taking pictures, and he's like, uh-oh, I think we may have had something to do with that. You know, the Teen Titans? Oh, well. And then he stops and he just tells the audience, like, hey, guys, I'm Kid Flash. I have adventures with the Teen Titans, blah, blah, blah. And then literally everything I just told you. So at this point, oh, by the way, it's very, very meta. Like, not that he's talking about us specifically, but, like, he's literally saying, like, here's an exact quote here. Continuity doesn't matter. Clarity is overrated. Let the fun begin. What? Okay. So anyway, he manages to track down the one pterodactyl girl and starts attacking her. And he's like, oh, man, you shouldn't be attacking pretty girls like that, even if they are dinosaurs, because you never know what kind of romantic subplots may happen. And so he tackles her out of the air. He catches her. And then they get the, back and forth real quick to explain what's going on here. And apparently her name is just Dak, so I was right. And apparently she speaks English, French, Italian, German, Mandarin, and Japanese, because why not? So anyway, they're like, oh, we just came here to find an adventure. We're having fun, me and my two friends. And their names are Terex and Steg. And at that point, Terex shows up, wraps his tail around Kid Flash, and they get into a little fight. And Kid Flash, of course, just like completely shows him up because he has super speed. To which Dak is like, why do you have to beat him up? We're friends. And then Kid Flash is like, you attacked me? Oh, whatever. Hey, anyway, where's your last guy? Where's Steg? So that you guys can go home. And he's like, I don't know. Like, he's probably just out somewhere. And so Kid Flash starts going around just looking for Steg. He eventually hears somebody screaming out for help, and he sees that in a pet store with a bunch of lizards, Steg has taken it personally that all these lizards are being kept in cages. So Kid Flash comes in, saves the people that Steg is terrorizing, and then Steg lets out some sort of mutagenic gas that causes all the lizards to evolve back into dinosaurs, which is not how that works, but regardless, it happens. And so now there's a bunch of dinosaurs running around Chinatown. And Kid Flash, like before he went to the pet store, the cops called him out on like, hey, weren't you that kid who set fire to that building? And he's like, okay, yeah, but I'm going to fix this. And so then he goes in, all that stuff happens. And when he comes back out, he tells the cops like, okay, this wasn't me. Like, I want you guys to specifically say it because I know how important a record is here. This was not me. So at that point, Kid Flash goes back and talks to the other dino kids, and he's like, hey, maybe you guys forgot to mention that he has some sort of mutagenic gas and also is a dinosaur supremacist. Maybe it slipped your mind a little bit. So at that point, he's like, all right, we gotta deal with him. We gotta take him out. And also, Kid Flash manages to put together that Terex has a thing for Dak, but like Dak has a thing for Steg, and so it's an unrequited love, and I couldn't care less. Regardless, they all start tying up all the dinosaurs, make it so that they can't go anywhere. And then the three dinos and Kid Flash meet up on top of a roof. And Steg throws away his bag of mutagenic gas, to which Terex points out, like, hey, that thing he just threw away, if he punctures it, it could literally turn the whole city into dinosaurs. And he's like, okay, but how would he puncture it? It's so far away. And then it's like, Steg is able to fire off projectile like barbs from his tail. And he's like, oh, cool, great. So anyway, immediately he fires off prehensile barbs. And Terex, I've already forgotten his name, and I literally just said it. Terex has to do some acrobatics to get out of the way, but he gets hit by a few. Meanwhile, Kid Flash speeds off to make it so that the barbs don't hit the bag, and he does manage to succeed. But when they get back, they see that both Dak and Steg are gone. And so Terex is like, I'm sure they went underground. It'll be my duty to find them. I must go down and find it. Also, that bag of mutagenic compound was empty, which means Steg had another one, and that was a decoy. So, yeah, that's going to be an issue. And then he's like, no, but I have to do this on my own. Your Teen Titans can't help. To which then a report comes in of a bunch of the dinosaurs that got away and like they're roosting on the Chrysler building and whatnot. To which Terex turns to Kid Flash and says like, okay, maybe I could use a little bit of help. So here's the thing. It says tune into Teen Titans to find out what happens, but like I'm like 95% sure here that there's like 3 pages after this that they're in the trade here. They were not in the issue. So I think we only get like 3 pages of follow-up on that. So, whatever. For this issue in specific here, I don't like Scott Lobdell's characterization for Kid Flash, which is what Fabian Nicieza here has had to do. He's had to use that. I like Jorge Jimenez's art. I'm going to put that forward right now. I do like the way that looks. But while I like how they handled the story overall, I think it was an interesting enough story. Like, oh, a bunch of dinosaur kids got loose. Like, why not? It literally just says, let's have some fun. Continuity doesn't matter. So, okay, I'm okay with that. But I don't like Kid Flash as a character, and that's because of how he is portrayed in Teen Titans. So him being so, like, literally there's a point in here where he's like, oh man, I couldn't get to the comic shop today, and revenge is off for the summer, so what am I supposed to do on a Wednesday night? Like, it's just having fun. I just don't like the character. So I don't know how to really grade that in this issue, but in terms of the issue as a whole, I feel like it's a 6.5. And a lot of that's the art. A decent amount of that's the art. But it is just kind of this average, like, okay, yeah, it's just a whatever. Like, it's a one-shot. It literally is just a story of, okay, and then Kid Flash met some dino kids. The end. Like, fine. 6.5, though. Wonder Woman number 12, written by Brian Azzarello, art by Cliff Chiang. We left off last issue with Zola finally being kidnapped by Hera. They go to Mount Olympus. Apollo's going to sit on the throne as part of a deal. And then Wonder Woman and Hermes show up to fight literally everyone. So this issue picks up with them just saying like, all right, well, the oracles have told me, and this is Apollo talking, the oracles have told me that there's a storm brewing that threatens to destroy our family. I'm just trying to keep that together with my strong hand, and that's why I will rule the gods from now on. And Wonder Woman's like, okay, well, here's the deal. You guys can do whatever. Like, I genuinely don't care, but Zola comes with me. And she's like, no, that's not going to happen. She's part of the prophecy. Like, the kid's part of the prophecy, so that's not going to happen. So anyway, the fight scene starts off. Wonder Woman's going up against Apollo, Artemis. And as far as I can tell, everyone else is just kind of standing there. So the fight scene goes on with them, and Artemis just has constant, like, the same banter, like 4 times. You're good, Amazon, but you can't beat me. And then Wonder Woman's like, but you will make me do better. And she's like, but it's not good enough. And she's like, how can you be sure? Because you are not good enough. It's just back and forth like that. But anyway, Zola, she's being dragged around by Hera, about to be tossed off of Mount Olympus as her water breaks. And in doing so, she's like, yeah, here's the deal. I made a deal with Apollo in order to get everything all set up here. But I know Zeus. Like, Zeus is not just going to give up the throne. As soon as Apollo sits in that chair, Zeus is going to come back, zap him with lightning, and kill him. And I'll have my husband back. And like, honestly, at that point, she'll be dead, so whatever. And she's like, all right, well, in your last moments, do you truly feel as though you loved my husband? And then Zola's like, I mean, for like an hour or so. And so she's She gets tossed off of Mount Olympus to fall forever. And at that point, Wonder Woman jumps down after her, and Hermes sticks her with one of his leg feathers, which allows her to fly. Because I guess she hasn't been flying this whole issue, or this whole series. I genuinely, gotta admit, didn't notice that. So she flies down, she grabs Zola, and saves her before she's, hitting any rocks or anything. And then at that point, Apollo sits in the throne, and a bolt of lightning strikes Mount Olympus. And Hera's like, yes, I was right. My husband's home, and you're going to get dicked over, Apollo. And then Apollo's like, oh, is that what you think's happening? No, that's not what's happening. I'm using the throne, and it just so happened to look like lightning, to reshape Mount Olympus. And now it's like this huge, building cityscape sort of thing, rather than just mountains of rocks. And then Hera falls down to her knees and says, oh my God, you're truly the king. You're truly the leader of us gods. And Apollo takes away something from her, just like a green shimmer, and then exiles her down to Earth. And Hermes is yelling at him like, oh, so you're a tyrant now? And he's like, yeah, I guess, if that's what it takes. So then Wonder Woman shows back up and says, all right, look, I've got Zola. We're ready to bounce. You can be your god if you want to. I genuinely don't care. But then Strife comes up and whispers in Apollo's ear like, hey, I mean, you are the king now, and the prophecy did say that whoever sits on the throne would be killed by his son or daughter of Zeus. So, and so then Wonder Woman's like, Strife, you bitch, how dare you? So it's like, it's in my nature, whatever. So at that point, Wonder Woman has Hermes and Zola escape, and she's ready to face down with Apollo and Artemis. Artemis is still ready for round 2, but Wonder Woman takes off her gauntlets, her cuffs, and they're like, really? Yeah, you're going to take off the thing that's stopping me from slicing your arms open? And she's like, oh, this wasn't my defense. It was yours. As her eyes glow blue, and she immediately just goes Super Saiyan on Artemis, and within one page, she's just knocked out. And Apollo steps up and he's like, all right, that's enough. Look, I already made one deal today. Would you like to make another? And Wonder Woman's like, okay, here's the deal. You are allowed to stay as god of gods, but then you are never allowed to come after Zola or the baby. And Apollo's like, deal. However, if it ends up being that this child of prophecy is the child of prophecy, you have to be the one to kill the baby. And she's like, all right, whatever. So Wonder Woman comes back to Earth to see Hera just crying in the mud. I'm forgetting her name. Lennox. Lennox is still there. I thought he was dead, but he's just bandaging himself up at this point. And Hermes is delivering the baby. And once the baby is delivered, Zola's like, can I see the child? And then Hermes teleports out with the baby. And Wonder Woman runs in and says, what happened? And Zola's like, oh, Hermes took my baby. And Hera comes in and she's like, yeah, he's also the god of thieves. Did you forget that part, you idiots? To which Zola throws a tray at her, and she actually starts bleeding, which means Hera is 100% mortal now. And Wonder Woman swears in that moment, look, Zola, I promise you, I will get your baby back, and we will get vengeance on Hermes, who has betrayed us. And then we see what happened to the baby. Hermes brought the baby to Demeter. I already forgot how to say it, Demeter, in order to be cared for. But Hermes is like, look, that baby's going to have a whole lot to go through. There's going to be betrayal. There's going to be death, perhaps the fall of Olympus. And we see a snowy landscape, and an arm busts out of the snow. And he says, or maybe you can look at it as a beginning. And the person coming out of the snow puts on a helmet. And he says, maybe this is the beginning of some new gods. And wouldn't you know it, the person in the snow is, I'm blanking on his name. Is it Apollo? I think it is just Apollo. I might be wrong on that, but the new god Apollo, literally, from Jack Kirby stuff. So now we're out in new gods, and whatever this baby's going on for. I liked it. I don't know. I'm so torn on this, because while it does have a great through line, it is very episodic in nature, where it's like, okay, we did that whole hell thing, and then we did that whole battling Apollo and Artemis thing, and we had the deal with Poseidon. It's very episodic in nature, but it does have this through line of what is the end goal? The end goal is save and protect this baby and Zola, but Zola's not a concern right now. So while I do like the arc as a whole, the trajectory of it, I suppose, the episodic stuff is like, okay, but like, why was Artemis so... I mean, she's the goddess of the hunt, I guess, but it's still... I don't know. It just didn't feel like there was any justification for that whole fight scene besides just, yeah, screw you, I got mine. So, yeah, I mean, I liked it. That's the most I can say from it, is that I liked it. I do wish, though, that at a certain point we do wrap up this through line in terms of... We've been going for 12 issues now of protect the child. I don't know. I'm kind of over it now. And clearly we've lost. But let's just wrap up whatever we're doing with the child and move on to the next thing. That's personally my thing. So overall, I'm going to give this one... I'll give it an 8. Mainly for Super Saiyan Wonder Woman and a few good twists in there. I think it was very well done throughout. The art was also fantastic. So give it an 8. And we will see what happens in the 0 issue, which I believe is... It might still be Wonder Woman's origin? I don't know. We'll see. Blue Beetle number 12, written by Tony Bedard, art by Ig Guara. Last issue we left off with Paco turning back into the Black Beetle, Red Beetle. This story is called Blood Beetle, so I'm going to go with Blood Beetle. And attacking the DEO. This issue picks up mid-fight. They're still attacking the DEO, and he has the upper hand, no problem. He's like attacking everybody there. He gets his hands on Director Bones, grabs him by the... I guess what you can call the neck, more the spine. And he's like, tell me where I can find that redheaded girl, Brenda Del Vecchio, or else I'll pop your skull off of your spine. And so Bones says like, oh, it's the door behind me. And he gets tossed aside, and Blood Beetle breaks out Brenda, who has no idea what's going on here. Meanwhile, Blue Beetle, Jaime, is still in costume, standing in the middle of his grandmother's apartment, and just like, oh dear God, what? I can't remember the last time I was here, and now I'm here in a bug suit. What in the hell? So they're looking over like some pictures and stuff like that. And the grandmother, who is very heavily Catholic, has a whole bunch of Jesus imagery around, which really confuses the bug suit. It's just like, oh, is that also a member of your family? And he's like, not really. And it's just like, then who is this bearded man with the exposed cardioid? It's like, that's Jesus. He kind of died for all of humankind. And the suit's like, that's irrational. How does self-sacrifice benefit others? And at that point, the grandmother comes in, and he's like, why are you still wearing that suit? And he's like, how do you know it's me under there, Grandma? And she's like, oh, of course, I just know it's you. Now, go ahead, take it off. And he's like, here's the thing. The last person who saw me, with my suit off kind of, got stabbed through the heart. And Grandma's like, do I look like I'm afraid to die? Psh, as she's smoking up a cigarette. And he's like, all right, well... yeah, I can do that. So he tells the bug suit, like, do not kill my grandma. I swear to God. And he depowers the suit, and they just share a nice long hug. And he goes over like, man, it's like that smell to her that just triggers all these memories. And the suit's like, what are these memories of love? So then at that point, the crazy like fortune teller lady woman busts into the grandmother's apartment, and she sees Jaime, says like, excuse me one moment, drinks some holy water, spits it in Jaime's face, and then calls it a blessing. 'Cause sure, why not? And then she tells him like, by the way, a boy and a girl were here, redhead and Hispanic boy. And he's like, oh, those are my friends. Where are they? What happened to them? And so the bug suit starts scanning for that thing in Paco's heart, and he's like, they're currently in a situation, and we see they're on top of a bullet train trying to track down Kajida. By the way, the bug suit now calls Paco, he calls him Kaji Paco, which I love. So Brenda's being held basically as bait. He's like, I recognize that Kaji Ka, a.k.a. Blue Beetle, which I'm just going to say Blue Beetle from now on, he's there to protect you. He's clearly trying to save you. So if I use you as bait, he'll show up. Because since I was deactivated, he should have taken over this planet's defenses by now, which he clearly is not. Therefore, he needs to be replaced. And you will be the ability to find so. And Brenda leans in because she knows Paco's underneath all of that. She leans into the whole like, Paco, I know that you like me. Like me. So maybe pay attention to me. Look this way. Don't look behind you. As bam, Blue Beetle shows up and lands a pretty solid punch, knocking Brenda off of this train as she starts plummeting down. But Jaime swoops down and saves her. But in doing so, he gets attacked by Blood Beetle and gets his head coated in some sort of mysterious liquid. And at this point, the suit's like, you have to use deadly countermeasures in order to win here. And he's like, no, I'm not killing Paco again, for God's sakes. There's got to be something we can do here. And he says, like, look, if there's anything I can do, like, I would give my own heart if it would mean saving Paco's life here. And the suit's like, you'd be willing to self-sacrifice? Like the Jesus man that you talked about before? And he's like, yeah, I guess, if you want to go that route. And he's like, all right, I have a plan. I'm downloading it into your brain because there's no time to talk. Also because we don't want the readers to know what's going on until it happens. So at that point, Blood Beetle's like, I am terminating the defective scarab. Goodbye, Kajika. But then Blue Beetle shoves his hand into Paco's chest, rips out the thing that was keeping him alive. So now it's just a giant hole in his heart. And then reaches into his heart and starts basically performing surgery where the suit clones part of Jaime's heart and then grafts it onto Paco's heart in order to save him. And the suit melts away from Paco, and he's still alive. He manages to gasp back to life, and he's totally fine. And Brenda's like, you did it, Blue Beetle. You saved him. Congratulations. So at that point, everyone is now like, oh, Blue Beetle's a hero. That's great. And Jaime's like, hey, Bugsuit, why couldn't we do that before? And Bugsuit's like, you taught me that there is a reason for self-sacrifice. Love. He doesn't say love, but he may as well have. So they all go back to his grandmother's apartment, and their grandmother makes a call to Jaime's father saying, like, hey, everybody's safe. They're all here now, but maybe, like, we should stay in contact. Like, because I think family is going to be very important to Jaime and his life moving forward now. You know, being a superhero. She doesn't say the last part, but that's what she means. And also, Jaime learns that Brenda's now, like, totally rich. So that's that. It was good. I think it was a solid wrap up to the whole New York thing of his friends saw him, and after he went through like 8 different trials, it ended up being that he just needed to reconnect with his family again. I think it had a nice little moral going into that of like, yeah, look, you can leave home, but your family's always going to be there. Your family and friends, apparently. So yeah, no, I liked it. It was a solid story overall. This particular issue, it did the full setup of Blood Beetle and then paid it off entirely. I think that it kind of it was leaning a bit too much into the, like, what is love? Teach me the ways of Jesus. Bit much. I liked it, though. I thought it was funny, especially the Kaji Paco part. That part, that got me. So, yeah, overall, solid story. I give it an 8. I think it was very well written. I think it was drawn very well, and I understood everything going on pretty straightforward. I think that it was pretty disjointed from last issue, being the whole Blue Beetle stuff, and apparently it says follow up on a adventure of Blue Beetle in Justice League International Annual #1, which is coming out in 2 weeks. So I guess that might tie into the Blue Beetle or the Booster Gold stuff somehow. But overall, this issue's fine, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. Legion of Superheroes #12, written by Paul Levitz, art by Francis Portela and Tom Derenick. Last issue left off with the group being betrayed by, I don't even know her name, and them all being captured by the Dominators. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this one brief. There's not a lot that happens, but, like, I'm going to try to explain everything. So they're on the Dominator ship. They're all being brought before the Primus Dominus or whatever. And as soon as they are brought before him, Dream Girl breaks out and just starts freeing everybody. And the Primus is like, oh boy, dinner and a show. That's great. So starts letting everybody out. And Duplicate Damsel, as I learned her name was, is going after Grava, a.k.a. the one who betrayed them. But Brainiac's like, no, stop. Like, we need to know why she betrayed us before we make any rash judgments. So out of all the chaos and hecticness, the one Dominator who had captured them was like, oh, this is all going to hell. I need to show off my secondary thing, which is I managed to fuse together a Daxamite and a Dominator. And so this super bulky, like, crop top looking dude comes out, who's like part Dominator, part basically Superman. And they're like, oh, that's not a good thing. Starboy, Starman, Star Guy, we need your help here. So they all start like coming up with plans of like, okay, he's distracted right now, but he's definitely super powerful, and he doesn't have any of Brainiac's or Dream Girl's genes in there, so he's just Daxamite. And then at some point here, Brainiac says to the tracker guy, Mwindaji, he's like, Mwindaji, can you? And then Mwindaji just says, not now. And then the fight starts. I don't know why he, like, it was just a weird little 2-panel thing of like, hey, can you? No. And then the fight. Like, okay. So at this point, there's a whole bunch of other eggs that apparently hold Daxamite Dominator clones, and they're all on this big tower thing. So then we cut down to the Legion on Earth, and Cosmic Boy, I am so terrible with this, is talking to Mon-El, basically saying like, hey, why aren't we going up there? Why aren't we at least watching the battle? And he's like, that's too far away. Like, we literally can't. Although, you just gave me an idea. So then we go back to the fight, and Brainiac's still looking for his belt in order to project a force field, as the Daxamite is literally tearing through a whole bunch of duplicate damsels. And then Star Boy comes in, and Brainiac tells him, like, look, you have to apply 250 Gs of force upon him, because I guess Star Boy can control gravity or something. So he does so, but it takes like an enormous amount of effort to do so, and it doesn't even knock out the Daxamite Dominator clone. It just like holds him still. So yeah, it's holding him still, but he's still knocking him out. And then they're like, hey, we should probably take care of the tree full of a bunch of other eggs. Meanwhile, in front of like the court or whatever that's telling them that they can't interfere with the Dominators, they bring out Sensor Girl, who apparently is a Legionnaire that's able to like use senses. It just says manipulate sensory information. Either way, she's able to see all the way to the Dominator's homeworld and see that the people, the Legionnaires are there. They have been kidnapped and they are currently being attacked. And the court's like, all right, well, we have your evidence and we will debate whether or not it is true and then whether or not you're allowed to go. And the Legions are like, no, we presented the evidence. We're going to go now. Bye. So they fly off planet over to the Dominators as fast as possible. And that's Mon-El and I think it's like Ultra Guy. So anyway, the fights continue on, and Duplicate Damsel tells Bouncing Boy to bounce into the tree that's holding all the other eggs and knock it over, which he does. And then the Primus Domus is like, hey, Dominator who was in charge of that stuff that just all of it failed, come here. And he's like, you gonna eat me? He's like, yep. And then he eats the Dominator. So then they're all surrounded still, and Starboy gets picked up by the Daxamite, and it looks like he's going to be, like, you know, thrown into the atmosphere. But then Mon-El shows up and basically just single-handedly, with Ultra Guy, just tears apart the entire army and says, like, all the rest of you, get on the ship. We'll take care of things here. So at that point, it's just like, oh my god, they're so cool. And everyone's like, yep, that's Legionnaires. So they're all on the ship and they're making their way home. And the new Legionnaire, like, rookies that were just, like, fresh out of the academy were like, I don't think we're, like, able to stand with them because they're way too cool. And Duplicate Damsel's like, no, like, if you weren't able to stand with them, you'd be dead right now. You guys did great. Good job. And then she walks her way over to Grava, the one who betrayed them, and just like, why? Why did you betray us? And then, who cares? So, next issue it says is Brainiac's original sin in the Zero issue. Here's the thing. I like the Daxamite Dominator. I think that was okay. It was a good reveal, especially with all the gene splicing they were talking about the whole time. I now that this is all it took for Mon-El to get to the planet, really just shows that that whole bureaucratic thing was like, yes, a clever like way of going around it, but it really was just a way of, if we get them on the planet, they will automatically win. In which case, you have yourself an OP character and you need to tone him down. Like, just straight up, if it's literally like, if this person's involved in the battle, we win. That's not a good team book. That's a good single book, but that's not a good team book. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a bit much, the fact that, like, Mon-El came in and just said, like, I'm here now. All of you can leave. Like, it wasn't even a team battle at that point. It was literally just Mon-El and Ultra Guy, which I'm going to keep calling Ultra Guy until they show his name again. And then I'll forget it again promptly afterwards. So all in all, this book, I'd say 6. It's capable. And it did its story. Did Brainiac ever get his belt back? I genuinely can't recall. Regardless, it's capable. Not great, but capable. The Shade, number 11, written by James Robinson, art by Fraser Irving. Last issue we left off with 2 giant Egyptian-looking deities busting out into central London and effectively rampaging through it. And this issue picks up with that. And we see a whole bunch of superheroes that come in. I think it's all ones that are like specifically London-based, but also characters who we've seen throughout this thing of the Shade. And then we see a guy named Beaumont, who apparently is indestructible. I can't remember if we've met him before, but he jumps out of a helicopter and he goes down to attack the gods and he just gets swatted away. And it's just like, well, guess that means it comes down to little old Shade. So then Shade goes through this whole thing, recounting like the whole series and all the things that he's learned over the course of his journey. So he says, my time in Australia, I learned to open a door to dream time. In Spain, I learned a new level to my shadowy powers, as well as the power of a pentagram. And so what he's going to do is he's killed a lot of people in London throughout the years. So he was able to just pick out a random pentagram from there, refuse it by killing a couple of like ne'er-do-wells, and then have the spell guy, whatever his name was, Silverfin, cast the spell that allows him to get like a hell of a lot more power. So he uses that in order to basically attack the gods. And what he's going to do is use his shadowy power to throw them into basically the dream world. So he does that. And he says like, yeah, they're kind of like distracted because, you know, they've been cooped up for a while. So that's the only reason I'm able to do this at all. If they were fighting back even the slightest, I wouldn't be able to. But he uses his powers and he transports them across dimensions to the dreaming, another plane, another place. But when he gets there, he's there with them and he turns out, oops, this ain't the dreaming. This is some other place entirely. And they're like, where are we? And he's like, I don't know. You guys have so much energy. We probably overshot the dreaming by like a couple dimensions or whatever. Also, you guys were rampaging through London. I shouldn't be talking to you. You guys suck. And they're like, yeah, okay, let me. Then they do like a back and forth because it's just they're in another dimension. Nobody can hurt anybody here. So they do a back and forth of basically him asking the questions of like, where'd you come from? And they're like, another planet? Yes, no. It's like beyond time and space. And he's like, okay, so you're interdimensional travelers. Why were you here? And they're like, oh, we're here to catalog. Like, we just come here and take notes and do whatever. But we got caught. Like your people like trapped us, and as such, the portal was closed. We got stuck here, and so we decided to make a vacation of it. But then you guys trapped us, and then once you let us out, we kind of went a little bit cuckoo, because, I mean, who wouldn't after all that time? And they're like, okay, well, if you guys have the power or whatever, why not just go back to your own dimension? It's just like, well, I mean, because we interfered, we broke our central tenet. And therefore, if we go back, we will be killed. So I guess we should go back. And Shade's like, wait, what? You still want to go back even though you'll be killed? And it's like, well, yeah, we're immortal beings or whatever, but like, we would rather live with our own people than die with you weird little hairless apes. And at that point, Shade is like, okay, I'm getting a moral out of this, but I'm just going to send you guys to your own dimension. I'm going to need your help, though. Just like focus on it and we'll get there. So he focuses super special hard and sends them back to their own dimension. And, you know, he makes some sort of thing of like, was that like, how does that apply to me? Because I am also, as far as I know, immortal. And I'm going to see all these people that I get to know die around me. And so I'm not like, should I be spending time with my own sorts of people? Like, or should I be spending it with people who are apparently beneath me? He's trying to figure out where he falls in that. But he talks to Silverfin briefly and just says, like, yep, that's that. And I think I'm going to stick around here in London for a while. I've got one more thing to do. And then he goes and he kills Dudley. Because of course he kills Dudley. Dudley was a dick. So he's like, yeah, but I can't help but thinking, if I never got my shade powers, would any of this have even happened? Like, would my family have gone down this darker path, or would they just be like an average family? I don't know. Oh well. But I did become the shade. I am the shade. I can't change that. So maybe it's time I finally talk about my origin. And then next issue, issue 12, the origin of the shade, which I guess has been shrouded in mystery. Could have fooled me. I had no idea what was covered in Starman. Genuinely no. So if this is the first time we're getting this, cool, sweet. It was good. I think it was a solid, because that's the thing. This book has always been talk rather than fight. It's never been a show of strength. Like, the strength is just there to know, so that Shade is never in any actual real, like, danger. But it's always just been out thinking and then talking to the opponents. And that's what ends up getting it through in the end. So this is perfectly in line with everything else the series has done up to this point, and I really did enjoy it. The art of that extra dimension was fantastic. It did a great job of, like, splitting faces, and it was all circle-based. It was very interesting and very well done on Fraser Irving's part. So overall, I give this issue... I give it a 7.5. Because while they do come out and have the talks and stuff like that, the talks are basically just the exposition of the Egyptian deities. They're not so much looking inward on the shade. And I know there was that last thing of like, oh, should I be fraternizing with people that are beneath me or should I be with people like me? But I don't know. He seemed to just brush that off so quickly. It didn't really seem like anything actually introspective. So maybe we'll get that next issue. Maybe that'll be where all the introspection comes from. But this one, the philosophical leanings were a little bit light, but I loved the way that they played with the dimensions, and I like how they covered the Egyptian deity stuff. So all in all, it worked. It was just a little bit lacking in that one regard, which is why 7.5 feels about right. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this August 15th, 2012. And yeah, I personally appreciated the fact that all the comics were pretty good. I didn't have anything that was too terribly low. Even Legion of Superheroes was fine. I still wish I knew any of the characters' names, but hey, whoever's in charge of designing those trades, stop taking out the names. Anyway, how about we just jump into next week? Let's see what we got. Next week, we have 12 comics on August 22nd, 2012, and they are the number 12 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Green Lantern New Guardians, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Savage Hawkman, Voodoo, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, iVampire, and Justice League Dark. As well, we have the number 3 issue of Batman Incorporated, which I believe was delayed at some point. I think it just didn't come out last month. So yeah, got that. Also, I'm going to put this here because by this point, most people have clicked away or started listening to other things. I made an oopsie, and I have been making an oopsie for about 4 months now. And that oopsie is I thought that iVampire ended on issue 12. It doesn't. I just misplaced my third trade of iVampire, which goes up to, I believe, issue 18. So, yeah, we got a lot more of that, which is great. I like that. I really love that series. So, yeah, look forward to that. Anyway, if you have any thoughts on how much of an idiot I am, any of the comics we talked about today, or any of the comics we're going to talk about next week, hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. Use the hashtag New52. Additionally, we have a Patreon you can pay into for as low as $1. You can get some stuff from other people. Nothing from me, though, because I'm a lazy bum. And that is Mild Fuzz TV. All one word, Mild Fuzz TV, for some bonus content from our various different channels. But that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you tune into this show. I hope very much to see you next time. And always try to remember that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.